Okay, I'm here with Tom Viennica and Ruth Castleman. Tom is the CEO of Edmonton Limited. Ruth is the CEO of the Accelerator Center. These are two colleagues from across Canada that I have great respect for, who I happened to be in the audience when they were on a panel. And I want to bring some of the flavor of that panel to the people who are working on this challenge, because it really was at that panel that I started thinking even more deeply about this. So Tom and Ruth have something in common. They were both entrepreneurs who now run organizations that are dedicated to supporting entrepreneurs. And one of the what this challenge is about, the importance of creating network value, creating connections between and among people to help accelerate their journey as an entrepreneur. And you both have had experiences doing this. So why don't we start with just a quick overview of what Edmonton Unlimited does and what the Center does, and then I'll ask you some questions.
Awesome. So yeah, Edmonton Unlimited is a an ecosystem, or I guess a hub in Edmonton that helps to develop the ecosystem in the tech industry, and we have space where people can come and be part of the energy of what we're doing here, but and then they can also build their companies here. We have programming that helps helps them as they grow, and then meet other people. A big part of what we do is bringing people together, convening, and uh, helping them find each other.
Great. Ruth.
So the Accelerator Center is in Waterloo, Ontario, and we work with about 150 early stage tech companies at any given point and help them to grow from an idea or maybe an early stage product or MVP and convert that through to a finalized product in a market where people will actually pay money for their product, and help them to learn how to get to that as quickly as possible. So that's primarily what we do. We do that through mentorship, mentors across all different areas of business and technical product development. And really, we're just here to help entrepreneurs do the best they can as quickly as possible.
Right. And I think, what's interesting is this case competition has a social innovation element to it. And I think all of us agree that we're like improving society by helping entrepreneurs get faster down the path, maybe off the path that they're on and onto a new one, but creating jobs and creating, businesses that are good for our communities. So, okay. So here's the thing. Both of you talked about pulling people together. And sometimes we do that in engineered ways through programs, and sometimes we do that, and it's very specific programs where we're trying to match someone to something. But a lot of what we do is this sort of informal process where people come together and do it, or we might put like light structure around it or some kind of structure around it. So, Ruth, why don't you take us through the business that you were building before briefly, and what that inflection point was in your experience. I think it was at Communitech, one of our other colleague organizations.
That's right. So the company that I founded was called Alert Labs. They are still ongoing and doing great every day. It was an IoT company specifically focused on water monitoring in commercial buildings for the purpose of water conservation and also for water damage prevention. And so we had the opportunity through Communitech, as mentioned, where they held what they called the Collision Day. So all of the insurance companies, really from across Canada, came to one day, and vetted startups were able to present to these insurance companies. And through that work, in one day, we ran 3 pilots with 3 of the top insurance companies in Canada. And we also ended up being the first in Canadian investment for Intact Ventures, which is part of Intact Insurance, of course. And so through that day, we really accelerated the growth of our organization almost overnight. And
And
so
so like a speed networking kind of a thing where you had an opportunity to meet everyone, or how did it actually work?
not so much the speed networking, but it was like curated networking. So the startup team went through and met all the startups, and they knew what the insurance companies were looking for, and so they did like a matching service. And then we were able to present. I think we probably had like 10 minutes, And then, of course, there were many follow-ups after that to
Yeah.
assist with us getting to know each other. But it was those introductions that, as a startup, they're so valuable to us, and it would have been almost impossible for us to get those connections without somebody making those introductions for
And
us.
they're basically almost like a broker between, like they knew all the insurance companies, they brought them to you, and in a
Yep.
day you were able to knock on every door that it would have taken you months to do. Um,
Yeah.
how much of it was, how many hits versus misses were there? Like, did you spend a whole day and talk to 50 people and three mattered, or was it a better ratio than that?
Like on the day that we did our
Yeah.
event.
Yeah.
So we did a pre-screening event with the Communitech team where we talked about what we did and what we might be able to help insurance companies with. And then it was on a single day that we met with, because everybody came together and we all
Yeah.
met in the same place. We met with, I don't remember actually, probably 5 or 6 different insurance companies. It wasn't 50. It was a
Yeah.
very tiny number. And out of that, we ended up with 3 pilots and 1 investment. So I'd
Nice.
say that's a pretty good ratio.
That's a definitely good ratio. And Tom, okay, so tell me about your business and the experience that you had where you met a key person.
Yeah, so I had well, two different kind of instances, and there were two of tech companies that I was a founder in, and meeting my co-founders in each of those. And so one of them was just a little bit more general sense, where I just being involved, being able to go to activities, in community activities, and eventually, because of those, got to know my co-founders and was invited into what they were kind of thinking about or working on. But then the other one was a little bit more specific, where it was a speed mentoring event that I'd been asked to come as a mentor, and so each of the mentees just had about 5 minutes with each of us, and then moved on to the next. And my future co-founders sat down in front of me and started telling me about what they were thinking about wanting to start. And I said, guys, 5 minutes is not enough for us to talk. I want to talk more about this, so let's go for lunch. We went for lunch and kind of hit it off with each other and started a business that day. The three of us founded VR Cave, and so that one was, like I said, really was a very specific one. I mean, that's one of those moments that is undeniable. If I don't sit down and meet those guys that day, we don't start a company ever. Like
Yeah.
it's not like maybe we would have found the customers anyways without that grant or whatever, but none of that happens if we don't sit down together. And it's a pretty to me, one of those really critical moments.
The first one, what types of community activities were you going to? Just like pitch events or
Yeah. So the very
just
first time I
networking?
saw my future co-founders there was at a pitch event. They were pitching their idea,
Yeah.
and then it wasn't until about 8 months later, or 6 to 8 months later, when I actually became or joined them. And but throughout that time, I was involved in this in the community, or wanted to be involved in the community. I was spending more time with kind of key people that eventually are the ones that match made us or put us
Yeah.
together. So I had
Yeah.
some awareness of them from my own experience, but then also my involvement in a community which had to exist, some sort of, a variety of events and things like that going on, that made it so my network eventually funneled us together and said, you guys should be working together, and
Yeah.
which we did.
So I have a quick story. We run a couple times a year an investor reverse pitch event where we put investors on the stage and they talk about their fund or whatever their investment thesis is, and we fill the room with founders and so that they can hear and meet these people. And we have two cases. One very specifically a startup that is now digitizing Nigeria's health system, and there was a med tech investor that spoke and said, we're looking for these kind of companies. He went up and introduced himself and said, I've just come out of stealth and I'm looking. And 6 months later, they had that investment. And at the very least, it sped up the process. And he had a lead investor and filled out a seed round. And we've seen that happen over and over again. So I know it helps. So here's the challenge, I think, just to kind of wrap up this part of the video in our chat with you is when you're thinking about the work that you're doing, um, how do you talk about this to people who care about what you do and what your results are, to government funders, to other supporters, even to people that you're pitching to, like, you should come to this, like, it matters, but it doesn't matter in that linear way that a one-to-one, like, I know I'm going to get, an investor out of this, or that kind of thing. So, Ruth, how do you think about talking about this, measuring it? What are the challenges that you experience when it comes to articulating this and even building it into your business strategy?
So, as the CEO of an incubator, I'm going to answer this question in two different
Yeah,
ways.
yeah,
Um, I say that I have really three jobs here at the Accelerator Center. One is helping organizations get early stage funding, whether that's through revenue or through investment. The other is coaching and mentorship, so that we can get to the endpoint faster. And the third is opening doors and making industry connections, because those are things, like those three things are things that startups mostly can't do for themselves, or at least
yeah.
not in a reasonable way or time frame. So to me, it's wildly important. I actually always tell my startups, every time you go to an event, go 15 minutes early, because you get that first 15 minutes to do networking that, once the program starts, you
Yeah.
can't do. So, and sort of to answer that question sort of personally, I am naturally an introvert, and it takes a lot of emotional energy for me to be in those rooms with all those people. But I go every single time because I know that something valuable is going to happen. And whether it happens right that minute or whether it happens 6 months later, I know that something important and valuable is going to happen by meeting people, talking about what you need, talking about your problems in a professional way.
Yeah.
But I put it out there. If you're looking for something, if you need something, you tell people what you need, and and people generally want to help. And if they can, they will. Or if they can make a connection to help, especially for startups,
Yeah.
they generally will. And so it's always valuable to be in those rooms having those conversations.
So So do you have KPIs associated with the number of connections that you've made for founders, or are the KPIs, like, it feels like we're spending a lot of time right now on leading and lagging KPIs. It feels like we're trying to get at leading KPIs. Like, the more we can connect people, the more likely they are to make a connection that's going to matter in their trajectory. Do you have any measures on your scorecards or stuff with your board or your funders around this
I,
stuff?
I don't yet.
Yeah,
It's something we're going through right now. To me, I'm not in love with KPIs of like how many connections did somebody
yeah,
make, because the point is the value of the connections.
yeah,
And as mentioned, that is hard to measure. And it's certainly hard to measure on a quarterly basis, because that connection may become valuable many, many
yeah.
cycles later. And so,
Hmm.
and again, what is the measure of value in terms of human connection? So I think that's a very difficult thing to measure.
Yeah.
Uh, but I know from a personal perspective, it's important to me, it's important to my organization, and I know for sure it's important to all of our startup
Yeah.
founders.
And we talk about it as part of core mission, but it's hard, but then we shy away from, not shy away from, it's just like really difficult to articulate it in a concrete way. People have to kind of believe you that this matters. Tom, what about you?
Yeah, so I use kind of two ways of explaining it to people when I'm trying to convince them of the importance of this, and one is pretty directly connected to it, and I think in entrepreneurship. This is kind of the natural process of entrepreneurship. You work your hardest, and then something serendipitous happens and cracks open a new level for you, and those moments seem like luck. Like when it's we often hear people say, wow, you're lucky, or that worked out really well for you, or whatever. And sure, that moment has some serendipity that is really difficult to replicate, but the preparation for that moment is a process that's pretty replicable, and you just have to work your buns off and do the right stuff. And I think that network type of outcomes are very similar, where what we have to do is set the stage really well so that you can so that when those serendipitous moments happen, they're happening with the right types of people, or really great people, or they're happening with the skill sets that you might need, or the doors that you need to open. And so that's how you can rig it, is by setting the stage really well. That's our job. And then the serendipitous moments are, for them to be called serendipity, they can't be manufactured by us by definition. And
Right.
so it is something we have to rely on for serendipity to take care of, and it does. And that's kind of shown all throughout. The other way that I like to describe it, which is a little bit more relatable to the vast majority of us, and maybe a little less directly related to entrepreneurship, and that is love. If you can't force, you can't say, I'm going to pick you, and you guys are going to fall in love. But what I can do is fill a room for 250 people, turn the music on, get everyone dancing, and then some people are going to fall in love,
Yeah.
and that's the serendipity part. So you have to set the stage and set the table in a very similar way, and that's our role, is to get people, in the mood, so to speak, thinking about the right types of things and the right types of people that are there. You can
Yeah.
um, you know, you can, again, set the stage. So
In a lot of ways, I think about even the way that our buildings are set up is, they're set up to do this. Sorry, Ruth, you were going to jump in.
No, that's okay. I just, while we were just talking about this, I wanted to continue my story for just 1 second
Yeah.
around the introductions that we had in the insurance space. Because so we were introduced on that one day to a number of insurance companies, as I said. One of the pilots that we did was through Aviva Canada, which is, I think, the number 2 size insurance company in Canada, which was great. We did a pilot with them. But through that process, we were invited to attend like a mini trade show of a number of different Aviva associated folks. We did that. At that trade show, we met the CEO of a large HVAC company, and he was just one of the attendees at the conference. And through that, he ended up introducing us to the company that ended up purchasing my
Your
startup.
exit. Yeah.
And at the same time, within the same week, one of our suppliers based out of San Francisco, we had also been working closely with them and building a relationship with them. And they ended up introducing us to the same company who ended up purchasing us within the same week. But the CEO that we met of that HVAC company, we met through the Aviva conference that we were introduced to through the collision day. So how are you going to measure that one?
Yeah, exactly. Well, okay, so that's a perfect way to kind of wrap this up. I mean, there's an element of this that it is serendipity, but what's interesting about both of your cases is and that how we talked about it is that part of our job is to understand our audience so well that we are able to tilt the odds in their favor so that these things will happen. And that is maybe part of the secret to making it work. And potentially, what we need to focus more on is not so much just thinking about, what our KPIs are, how this came out, but rather how can we continue to do a better job of tilting the balance in favor of these serendipitous moments and learning more about the process and how it goes and when these things are coming out. So it's more of a continuous improvement kind of a thing. So well, okay, that's going to be really helpful. Thank you so much for your time.